You know, when you're so tired that you start to wonder if your own shadow isn't trying to warn you about something? Well, that's exactly how I felt that night. Or at least that's what I thought before realizing that, well, not everything that follows you is your shadow. Today you're going to hear another strange story, or at least one of them. And if you have one of your own, one of those that makes you doubt whether you're still alive or just going with the flow, send it to us. Who knows, it might become the next video. Because if it's already hard to sleep, let it be for the right reason, right? Now let me tell you about the night one of my patients asked to be buried alive. And the worst part, I think he wasn't the only one. I worked in the palliative care unit of a community hospital in rural Virginia. Usually it was quiet, sad, but quiet. You learn to live with death as if it were a colleague on your shift, kind of grumpy, but predictable. But that night there was nothing predictable about it, not at all. My shift started at 7 p.m. and right away, I noticed the atmosphere was strange, not the kind of strange you feel when you're about to catch a cold or when you forgot to lock your car. It was something deeper, quieter, as if the air was waiting for something. And honestly, so was I. Room 12 had always been considered charged, but nobody said it out loud. It was the kind of superstition you laugh at politely, but deep down prefer to avoid whenever possible. But that day, guess where they put me? Exactly, room 12 under my care. My patient was a man named Lewis. He was in his 50s, but he looked older, or maybe just very tired. The kind of tiredness that doesn't come from the body, but from what came before it. Whenever I looked at him, I had the impression that his skin was too thin, almost translucent. He didn't talk much, but on that particular night he seemed agitated, not physically. It was as if the anxiety was happening inside, not outside. His breathing remained calm, but his eyes did not. They followed each person who entered the room, as if they were keeping track of who was arriving and who was leaving. As if someone was missing. Around 2:15 a.m. and yes, it's always at these times that everything goes wrong. I was checking his vital signs when I noticed Lewis staring at me as if he had finally mustered the courage to say something he had been holding back for a long time. I didn't say anything, I just waited. He closed his eyes, for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and opened them again, but something was different. I can't explain it. But it seemed like he was seeing two versions of me at the same time, one that was there, and another that shouldn't be. And then he said the phrase that would change everything that night. Without raising his head, without moving his arms, without altering his tone of voice, he simply whispered, "I want you to bury me before they arrive." I froze. Not because the phrase was absurd, and it was, but because he said it with such absolute calm that he seemed to have already accepted his own choice. As if the act of being buried wasn't an end, but a form of escape. And that's when I realized something that only made everything worse. Lewis wasn't looking at me when he asked. He was looking at the corner of the ceiling, at a fixed point, an empty point. And his eyes didn't blink. When I followed his gaze, I only saw shadow. Ordinary shadow, I think. But when I looked back, at Lewis he seemed lighter. As if he had taken an old weight off his shoulders. Or as if he had handed that weight over to me. I took a few steps back, not out of fear, but because my body moved on its own, as if it wanted to create distance between his request and reality. And also because I felt something change in the room. The temperature didn't drop, it didn't rise, it just pulled, like an invisible vacuum trying to take the first step to enter. The monitors remained normal. His vital signs remained stable. The entire hospital was quiet, too quiet for a building with over 100 patients. And then a thought hit me hard. He wasn't asking me for help. He was giving me a warning, a belated warning. Because, from the corner of the room, I heard something dragging itself. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that breathed too slowly to be human and too fast to be dead. The light in room 12 flickered, but not like a light bulb about to burn out. It was different. As if something had passed in front of it quickly enough to cut off the light for a second. I felt the air pull again, the same sensation as when someone opens an emergency door and the pressure difference pushes you a step back. Except nothing was open, nothing was moving, at least not where I could see. I approached the door slowly, still feeling that silent presence behind me. It was like when you enter a dark room and you're sure you're not alone, even without hearing anything. An ancient primal feeling that comes before logic. And in that hospital, logic didn't help many people. When I left the room and looked down the hallway, I realized it was different. Maybe it was the lighting, always too dim during the night shift, but it seemed narrower. It was as if the walls were a little closer, as if the building were breathing along with me. The corridor to the left led to the nursing station. To the right, to a wing that had been deactivated years before due to structural mold. Officially, no one went in there, but that night the door was ajar. My feet didn't want to go in that direction, but the rest of the hospital did. It was as if the floor was slightly inclined, leading me to the forbidden wing. And with each step I took, the feeling of being watched increased, but not by a pair of eyes. Several. The entire hospital seemed to be paying attention. When I reached the door of the deactivated wing, I realized that the air there was warmer. Not like summer heat, it was a humid, heavy heat, similar to the air that comes out of a mouth that breathes too close to your neck. The smell was also strange, a mixture of old disinfectant but something too sweet to be flowers. I tried to go back, my body wouldn't let me. It was as if the door behind me had locked, even though I hadn't touched it. And in that total silence, where even the monitors in the active ward seemed to no longer exist, I heard something coming from the darkness, a slow, irregular dragging, like fingernails, scraping on wax floor. And then I realized the sound was coming at the same speed as my breathing. When I held my breath, it stopped. When I released it, it returned. It wasn't an echo. It was imitation. As if something were just inches away trying to learn how to breathe. The deactivated ward was completely dark, except for a low, yellow light coming from the end of the corridor. Light too warm for a fluorescent lamp. Light of something old. As soon as I took my first step inside, the door behind me closed, slowly, noiselessly, and it locked. The temperature rose a little more, and the sound of the dragging became faster, more anxious, as if whatever was there didn't need to see only to feel that I had finally entered. I kept going because there was no other option, and the further I walked, the more the corridor seemed to fold in on itself. Not literally, but in the way the architecture no longer fit my memory. It was like entering a place I knew, but that had been copied and pasted incorrectly. The doors had no numbers. The pictures on the wall were all the same, and the shadows didn't match the shape of the objects. My stomach clenched when I noticed something to my right, a stretcher, an old one, and on it, a sheet covering a body, or something trying to take the shape of a body. It was thin, tall, too long to be natural. The fabric trembled slightly, as if something were breathing beneath it. But it wasn't the breathing that was frightening. It was the fact that it was synchronized with mine. Exactly. With each breath I took, the sheet rose. With each exhale, the sheet fell. It was as if it were learning from me, copying every movement, every rhythm, every micro-tremor. As if it were waiting for the right moment to hit it, I kept walking. The light at the end of the corridor grew brighter, but it didn't seem like electric light. It was an almost amber color, pulsating, like a live ember. And even before I arrived, I already knew I wasn't alone in that wing, because each of my steps echoed in more than one place. And not all the echoes came from behind. Some came from the front, others from the ceiling. And one of them, the slowest, the heaviest, came in exactly the same direction I was walking, as if something were guiding me or accompanying me. When I finally reached the light, I realized it wasn't coming from a lamp. It was coming from a half-open door, a metal door, with an old sign, rusty, with a number that never existed in the hospital. 2-2, below the basement, below any record, below any place a living being should be. And as soon as I leaned against the door, even before opening it, I felt something touch my shoulder, cold, long, thin, something that breathed too slowly to be human. And then the lights behind me went out at the same time, all of them, at once. And I was left in absolute darkness, between what was behind me and what awaited behind that door. I should have left that instant, asked for a transfer, disappeared off the map, accepted that job at a clinic without shifts that my friend keeps offering. But no, I went back to the ward floor, took a deep breath, and pretended nothing had happened. But the hospital doesn't let you pretend for long. The first strange thing that morning was the room allocation chart. It was always full of names. People coming in, going out, transferred, patients who improved, patients who worsened. That normal turnover that makes a hospital, even a sad one, feel alive. But that day, a third of the ward was empty. Names erased, paper files removed, as if someone had wiped an entire patient's mind out of the system. The supervisor, Karen, noticed my expression. Problems with the shift schedule? She asked, adjusting her name tag. I hesitated. We're short-staffed. Yes. We had some unplanned discharges, she said, without looking at me. I raised an eyebrow. Unplanned discharges? That simply doesn't exist. No patient leaves without paperwork, without a doctor, without 3 signatures, and at the very least, without a taxi. Curran noticed my suspicious silence and added, sometimes people get up and leave. Some don't even want to be found, and she left before I could ask more. That wasn't an answer, that was a diversion. And then came the second strange thing of the morning, a new nurse. Or, I thought she was new. She was standing at the end of the hallway wearing that blue uniform I was wearing myself, holding a clipboard, looking at me, as if she were waiting for me to greet her. But there was something wrong with her, something I didn't notice at first. When I got closer, I tried to smile. Are you new to the ward? I asked. She took 3 seconds to answer. 3 seconds completely still, motionless, as if she were processing my voice. I work where you need me, she said, in a voice that seemed copied. And then she smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. My stomach churned. Before I could ask anything, someone called my name behind me. When I turned to answer and looked back, she wasn't there anymore. She vanished. An entire hallway empty, no open doors, no footsteps, no noise. As if she had evaporated, or gone back somewhere behind the wall. The third strange thing of the day happened 2 hours later, when I went to check the supplies inventory. The room was a mess. Open cabinets. Boxes on the floor. As if someone had been desperately searching for something. But what gave me chills was what I saw under. The table. Handprints. As if someone had crawled there to hide. And then I realized they were too small to be from an adult. Small and wide, with fingers that were too long. I took a step back, and that's when I noticed something at the back of the room, behind the oxygen cylinders. A reflection. 2 white dots, too low to be the eyes of someone standing. When I approached carefully, those 2 dots disappeared. I don't know how to explain it, but it seemed like something had retreated, deeper, as if the wall wasn't a wall, but a path. I left the room with my heart racing. My whole body screamed for me to leave, but my head wanted to understand. And that's why I decided to go back to where it all began. The old room, 309, or the piece of wall where it should have been. When I got there, I froze, because now there was a door. Not yesterday. Not in the early morning. Now, a common hospital door with a luminous digital number flashing green. 309. As if it were calling me from afar. And what made my hands tremble wasn't the door turning back. It was the absurd detail. In the frosted glass window, there was a shape, a silhouette. A man tall, motionless, looking at me through the shadow. And then, as if someone were slowly running their finger across the glass, a mark appeared. 5 long scratches, slowly descending, as if the thing inside was smiling. I took a step back, and then the voice I heard on the wall the day before returned, clearer, closer. I told you the room turns back when you're ready, nurse. My knees almost gave way, because, for the first time, the voice wasn't behind the door, it was behind me. I froze. Not because the voice was scary, I was past the point of being scared. It was because it was just inches from the back of my neck. I felt the warm air hit my hair, but when I turned, nothing. The hallway was completely empty, no patients, no companions, no nurses, not even the constant hum of the monitoring machines. It was as if the hospital was holding its breath. And then I noticed something strange. The door to room 309 was open, just a little, about 4 centimeters, enough to let out a trickle of air that seemed to go in and out as if someone inside was breathing very slowly. My throat went dry. My instinct told me to run. But my curiosity, that damned part of me that became a nurse because I believe everything has an explanation, pushed me forward. I reached my hand towards the door. And then I heard it again. Don't push. He likes to open it by himself. I swear I jumped back as if I'd been electrocuted. The voice now came from the ceiling, or the walls, or both at the same time. And before I could process anything, the door opened by itself, slowly, sliding as if someone invisible were pulling on the doorknob. And inside, there was a room, a normal room. Bed, monitor, window, chair, everything as it should be, everything completely normal. Except that I knew with absolute certainty that room didn't exist. It had disappeared the night before, literally, as if it had been erased from the architecture. I had touched the smooth wall where the door should have been. And now, it was there, perfectly assembled, as if it had been put back while I blinked. A faint smell of cleanliness lingered in the air, mixed with something more metallic. Dried blood, almost imperceptible. I went in, because that's what stupid people do in stories like mine. And because at that moment I needed to prove to myself that it all made sense, but the logic stayed outside. As soon as I took 2 steps inside, I noticed the room was wrong. The bed sheet was stretched too tightly, without a single crease. The walls had no marks, no wear and tear from time. Not even dust, nothing. It was a perfect room, too perfect. And in the center of the mattress, there was a mark. As if someone had lain there moments before, but it wasn't the mark of a normal body. It was longer, deeper in the chest area. Almost as if the weight had been concentrated in the thorax, not distributed like a human's. I swallowed hard and approached. And that's when I saw it. Right in the corner, next to the headboard, there was an object that shouldn't be there. My badge. The badge I swore was in my pocket, the badge that was with me the whole time. And the worst part, the photo on the badge wasn't mine. It was another nurse's. Tired face, sunken eyes, hair haphazardly tied up. And the detail that made me take a step back. She was wearing the same blue uniform as the new nurse in the hallway. The same blank expression. The same smile that didn't reach her eyes. I was holding her badge, but with my name printed on it. As if the hospital were making exchanges, replacing parts, updating inventory. That's when I heard the sound. Breathing. But not in the room. Behind me. I turned slowly, and there she was. The new nurse, or what I thought was a nurse. Standing in the doorway, motionless, head slightly tilted as if analyzing my reactions, and in her hand, my real badge. She took a step inside, and the way she moved made me nauseous, weightless, no impact on the floor, as if being pulled by invisible wires. I tried to say something, but my mouth went dry. And then she smiled, this time with her eyes, and said, in a voice that wasn't human but made of many voices together, "He wants you on the shift today." I recoiled so quickly I hit the bed, and that's when the hospital lights went out. Everything went completely dark, the kind of darkness that swallows depth and distance. And in the darkness, I heard a sound I could never forget. A bed being occupied behind me, the mattress sinking, springs creaking, something heavy positioning itself, and a deep breath, slow, wet, right behind my shoulder. The breath behind me was so real I could feel the warm air hitting the back of my neck. And for a moment I thought about not turning around. Because every human instinct knows. If you don't look, maybe it doesn't exist. But I was past the stage of believing comfortable lies. I turned around, slowly, millimeter by millimeter. What was on the bed had no defined shape. It was like a blurred human body. The sheet rose and fell, but didn't obey a correct breathing rhythm. Sometimes it accelerated too much. Sometimes it would stop for seconds that were far too long. I could see something moving beneath the fabric, not arms, not legs, wrong protrusions. As if something were testing the very idea of being human. The heart monitor beside the bed began to beep. Not an emergency sound. A steady sound. Life. The tag attached to the bed read, "Patient, Ingrid M. status. Observation, my stomach sank." This is impossible. I whispered, even though I knew the hospital always listens when you speak softly. The sheet moved once more, and then it stopped. Absolute silence. The continuous beeping became a straight line. Death. The light above the bed flickered. Once. Twice. On the third flicker, the sheet lowered itself. Whatever was underneath finally decided to reveal itself. It was me, but not exactly. The face was mine, but smoother, as if it had been reconstructed from a hazy memory. The eyes were too wide, the smile too broad. And when that thing spoke, it used my voice. "You took your time, Ingrid." I took a step back, then another. I bumped into something solid. When I turned around, the room was full, not of people, of beds. Dozens of them, lined up, appearing out of nowhere, occupying every inch of space. In each one, someone was lying. Nurses, I recognized faces. Women who had disappeared over the years. Some I only knew from old photos on the HR bulletin board. Others I remembered greeting at the coffee shop. All motionless, but awake. Their eyes moved at the same time and turned to me. "You were the last to resist," said the thing in the bed. "Most accept quickly. The hospital prefers it that way." "Prefers what?" My voice faltered. The creature sat up. Her body creaked like old furniture being used for the first time. "Exchange, Ingrid. It's always been an exchange." The lights in the room began to pulse like a giant heart. People come in, people go out, but the building needs to keep functioning. Someone needs to stay. My chest tightened. I'm just a nurse. She smiled. Exactly. The other beds began to move. Not toward me, but closer to each other, fitting together, merging, as if the hospital were folding space. You take care of others. You walk the corridors unquestioned. You're invisible when you need to be. The floor vibrated. The walls breathed. "You already belong here." I just hadn't realized it. I felt something tugging at my feet. I looked down. The floor was no longer solid. My legs were sinking slowly, as if the floor had transformed into warm skin. "No," I murmured. The creature rose from the bed. When it touched the floor, I felt it, as if something had finally been put in its right place. It walked toward me. Each step made the monitors beep in sync. "It's not death," it said, stopping inches from my face. "It's permanence." She held out her hand. Her fingers were too long. "Too numerous." "I'll take your life. You take the hospital." I closed my eyes. And for a second, I thought of all the nights I felt footsteps behind me, of all the creaking doors, of all the corridors that seemed longer after midnight. Maybe it had never been a chase. Maybe it was training. When I opened my eyes, again, I was standing alone at the nursing station. The clock read 3:17 a.m. The hospital was silent, normal. A colleague passed by me. "Ingrid, are you okay?" she asked. "You look pale." I looked at my hands. They were normal, human. I replied. "Just tired." She nodded, as if that explained everything. Welcome to the night shift." She smiled and left. I looked down the hallway. In the reflection of the glass, I saw someone standing behind me, not a shadow, not a monster. A nurse, with my old face, watching, waiting. Since that night, I've continued working at the hospital. People still come in. Some never leave. And sometimes when the building is very quiet, I feel it, like something is lying inside me, breathing. I've learned one thing: some hospitals don't treat patients. They learn from them. And if you ever work in a place that swears it only has 2 floors and hear footsteps following your exact rhythm, don't run. Don't scream. The hospital isn't after you. It's just preparing you to stay. Until the next story.